If you feel like you're stuck at your current English level and you can't make any progress towards becoming a fluent English speaker, today's lesson will help you out. If you want to quickly increase your vocabulary and immediately start to sound more native in your English conversations, then you need to be studying phrasal verbs. In today's lesson, I'll clarify how you can use just a simple verb and when you actually need to use the phrasal verb. Sometimes the difference between a verb and a phrasal verb is very subtle and very small, and sometimes it's really dramatic and it's huge, so you need to know when to use that phrasal verb. I'm going to go over a list of 20 phrasal verbs versus the plain verb today, and by the end of this lesson, you'll be able to use them in your conversations to sound more fluent and very natural in your English conversations. Let's get started with today's lesson. Let's get started by talking about some phrasal verbs containing the preposition up. We have pay versus pay up. When you talk about paying for something, it's simply giving money to cover the cost of something. For instance, every month you need to pay your rent. Very simple to use this verb. Now, have you heard native English speakers say to pay up?
Pay up.
This phrasal verb makes it a bit more forceful, like you need to pay up, your rent is due today. It's saying that your rent is due immediately, and it's trying to make someone pay you. Usually it's being a bit more forceful. Or if you say, oh, I have to pay up, my rent is due today, it's talking about that urgency. It's implying that you don't really want to pay, but you need to do it because it's due right now. So in this case, the difference between pay and to pay up, it's very small. But if someone is saying pay up, you better know that that phrasal verb is being forceful and it's meaning that you need to immediately pay right now because you owe some money. And I would say pay up is often used if someone owes you money for rent or if they owe you money for a bet or maybe you loaned them money a long time ago, anything like that where it's kind of unpleasant to collect, but you need the money immediately right now because they owe you. Our next phrasal verb we're going to look at is call up. So if you simply say you're going to call someone, you're either going to shout their name or you're going to call them on the phone.
So just call her up?
Just call her up?
For instance, you might say, I have to call my friend tonight, or I have to call my boss later. Now, if we say call up, the difference, again, is small, but it's very meaningful. If you say you're going to call up someone, it means you're going to call them on the phone. We don't talk about shouting when we're saying call up. And usually it means you have official or very formal business with the person. Like, I need to call up my boss tonight. This is implying that it's a bit more of a formal, scheduled phone call. Or even instead of just saying, I need to call my friend, you could say, I need to call up my friend. This maybe implies that you have a reason that you need to call them rather than just wanting to chat. Or maybe you need to call them to ask for something or schedule something. Let's talk about a phrasal verb that's used, I think, almost more than just the simple verb in this case. So we have to patch versus patch up. So when we use the verb to patch, we mean we're going to repair something or cover a hole. So if you have a hole in your wall, you usually need to patch the hole. But more commonly, English speakers will say we're going to patch up the hole. So this can mean to repair. It's used kind of in the same way as patch, but also we use patch up to talk about repairing relationships or resolving problems. Perhaps you have two friends that have been arguing for a long time, so maybe they haven't really been friends in a while, but one day they decide to patch up their relationship by, apologizing and saying they're sorry and such. So patch up in this situation means to fix a relationship rather than a hole in the wall or a hole in your clothing. And one thing to note here is we can't say we're going to patch a relationship. Someone might know what you're saying in this case, but it sounds a little awkward, and it's not how a native speaker would use this verb. In this case, they would always use the phrasal verb when it comes to talking about repairing relationships.
Patching people up isn't my thing.
Keep versus keep up. So when you simply use the verb keep, you're always talking about keeping possession of something, maintaining possession. So I'm going to keep this book that I got from the library for 2 weeks. So that means I'm going to have it at my house before I return it. Or if you give someone something and they say, do you want this back? Am I just borrowing this? You might say, no, you can keep it. It's yours. That means you get to have it in your possession permanently. Now, when we add up to this verb, it changes the meaning dramatically. When you say you're going to keep up with someone, it means you're going to maintain the same pace or the same speed. So maybe someone is working next to you and you also want to work as hard as them. You could say, I'm trying to keep up with you. Or maybe they're explaining something to you and you want to show them that you're trying to understand every step of the way. You might say, oh, I'm keeping up. I understand. And also when we're walking or running, this phrasal verb is used all the time to say, I got to keep up the same speed. Hey, can you keep up? Can we keep going fast? So we're talking about speed or pace of work a lot when we use the phrasal verb to keep up.
Keep up.
Let's move on to speak versus speak up. When you say that you want someone to speak, you want them to just say words. You want them to express their ideas out loud with their voice. Now, when we say speak up, we are only talking about talking louder. So if someone's talking and you say, hey, speak up, they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you couldn't hear me. So it's literally just asking someone to speak louder when you say speak up or could you please speak up? I can't hear you. One other way that we use speak up is to tell someone that they need to express their feelings, even if it's going to be, kind of difficult to say your feelings or your opinion in a situation. You might say, hey, you might want to speak up if you disagree with them. This means you might actually want to share your opinion rather than just remaining silent. So speak up is really mainly used when we're talking about speaking louder or sharing our opinion in a difficult situation.
Speak up, speak up.
To pair versus to pair up. It's very important to understand the difference between these two because the meaning really changes here. So to pair means to match two things. For instance, you might want to say, I paired a sweatshirt with a pair of jeans. So pair in this case would mean you put them together. Or oftentimes we say, I'm going to pair these shoes with this pair of pants, whatever it might be. And even sometimes we talk about putting food together. So I'm going to pair this cup of wine with this steak. I mean, you're going to eat them and drink them together. When we use the phrasal verb to pair up, we're usually talking about two people getting together to accomplish a task or project together. So if your office manager says, hey, everyone pair up and start to work together, this means find one other person to work with. You can also use pair up in almost the same way as to pair. But again, you can't say, hey, pair with someone. That doesn't sound as natural as pair up with someone. So that's why we add the up because we're implying that they need to get together to accomplish a task.
All right, Wildcats, pair up.
To change versus to change up. This will be our last phrasal verb using the preposition up. This one is really important. I could have listed so many phrasal verbs using up because this is such a common particle in phrasal verbs, but I had to limit my list here because we're going to move on in a second. But let's talk about changing versus changing up. So first, when you change something, you completely swap it out or you completely alter it. You're making it different. So if you change your outfit, that means you're wearing different clothes now. If you say you're going to change up your outfit, that does not mean you're going to change your clothes completely. You're not going to be wearing a completely different outfit. It might just mean that you're only going to change one piece of your outfit. For instance, you might say, I'm going to change up my outfit today and wear tennis shoes instead of high heels. So you're just changing one thing about your outfit. Or I'm going to change it up today and I'm going to put my hair up instead of down. You're not really changing your hair that dramatically in this case. You're just kind of doing a slightly different style. Or maybe if you like to exercise and you typically do the same workout, maybe if you add in something different, you say, I'm going to change up my workout a little bit today and I'm going to lift weights instead of just running. So you're still exercising, but you might just do something to add some variety, which is also another way that we use change up to mean that we're just going to add something a little different, a little bit of variety to make things interesting. If you're playing a game and you want to slightly change the rules, this is when we would say change up. So I'm going to change up the rules a little bit. This means that you're not going to change the game completely, but you're going to maybe just change something small. You're going to tweak something small to make the game either more difficult or more fun.
Good. Now change up.
Now we're going to move on to some phrasal verbs that contain out. First, let's talk about to speak versus to speak out. So obviously to speak, we already talked about it. It means just to use your voice to say what you're thinking, say an idea. If you speak out on something, it means you disagree or you talk about something that's very important. Let me give you a couple examples here. So you can speak out on an important political issue that maybe a lot of people are going to disagree with you on, but you're speaking out because you think it's what's right, even if it's difficult to have others agree with you. Or maybe something at work isn't going well. Maybe you're not being treated fairly. So maybe you need to speak out and say what's happening because it's going to benefit everyone else if you speak out or talk about the issue or bring it to somebody's attention.
Speak out.
Here's one that often confuses English learners. So we're talking about to give versus to give out. If we give something, it means, we just hand it to another person. Then when we say we're going to give out something or we're going to give out a lot of things, it means we're going to hand them for free, usually to multiple people. So if you say they're giving out free food, it means they're giving it to everyone. Or if you say the teacher is going to give out the test on Monday, it means she's going to, hand out the test to everybody in the class. One phrasal verb that's a little bit similar but a little bit different here is to give away. When we say we're going to give away something, it means we're going to just give it to someone for free because usually we don't need it anymore. Or if we say that they're doing a giveaway, it means they're giving out a prize or some sort of valuable thing.
We can't give it out.
To die versus to die out. So obviously to die means to pass away, to perish, to, go into the light, whatever you might think about dying. Now, when we say something is dying out, we're not talking about someone actually dying. We're talking about something gradually disappearing. For instance, there are a lot of languages that are just dying out because maybe people don't speak them a lot anymore. For instance, some people say Latin is a dead language because no one actually speaks it in their everyday life anymore. So Latin is dying out. Or if there's an animal that's slowly becoming extinct, many years ago, people would say lions are dying out because, maybe they were being poached or their habitat was in danger. So that means the species is slowly going away. The animal is slowly going away. It's dying out. So that's the difference between to die and to die out. So you definitely don't want to confuse these two next phrasal verb and verb. So to drown means to, in the water, you can't swim and you can't breathe and you're about to die in the water because you can't get to the top. Or maybe if you're in the ocean and you get stuck underwater, you'd be drowning. When we say to drown out, it is quite different in meaning. If we're going to drown out noise, it means we don't want to hear that noise. So we turn on something louder in order to make it so we can't hear something that's annoying us or, keeping us awake or whatever it might be. A lot of times people turn on a fan at night to drown out any noise that might wake them up. Or for young babies, sometimes we turn on a sound machine to drown out other noises in the house because we don't want them to get startled and wake up. If you are at a restaurant or at a party, and you can't hear the person you're talking to, you could say the music is drowning out our conversation. So that means you can't hear what the other person's saying because the music is so loud, it's drowning it out. So drown out is a very useful phrasal verb, and you need to know how it differs from just saying to drown.
To drown out your snoring.
To close versus to close down. So to close simply means, to shut something. So can you close the fridge? Can you close the door? Can you close your mouth? Now, when we say close down, we always have to use this phrasal verb when we're talking about businesses or companies or shops. So you could say, what time does your shop close down? And this means close the doors and open up again. But more frequently, we use this phrasal verb to say that a business is going to completely close forever. It's going out of business if it closes down. So there was a store in the United States called Party America, and they closed down. So that means they're not open anymore. They weren't making money, probably because people buy their party supplies on Amazon. And so they just closed down. They couldn't keep their doors open anymore. Right now, another company that is closing down in the United States is Joann Fabric. So people who make quilts and they make their own clothes are very sad because their favorite fabric store is closing down. Sadly, a lot of businesses closed down during COVID because they had no customers.
My favorite restaurant closed down.
To nail versus to nail down. If you nail something, it means you secure it with a hammer and a nail. You hammer it down, you nail it down. Then, when we use the phrasal verb to nail down, it means to finalize something. So, the most common way I use this phrasal verb is if I'm talking to a friend and we want to meet up, we want to hang out. We don't really know when we're available. Maybe I'll say, oh, I'll text you and we can nail down a time. This means we can finalize a time or make it official when we're actually going to hang out. Rather than just saying, we should hang out sometime. I'll be like, we should nail down a time to hang out. So this is making it official, finalizing something. Another way that people use this phrasal verb is they say, we're going to have this project, but we need to nail down the details. This means we need to sit down and actually think about how this project is going to work, or maybe we can nail down everyone's responsibilities later. So we're saying that later we'll choose which job everyone is doing in the project. So nailing down details or nailing down a time, or we nail down an official name, whatever it might be. When you use this phrasal verb, it means you need to make something official, and usually you're kind of procrastinating it if you're saying, I'm going to nail it down later.
Trail them down, nail them down first.
This is a phrasal verb that native speakers never really think about how they use differently than just the regular verb, but it really confuses English language learners. I'm talking about to write versus to write down. So to write is a very general verb. You can be writing a book, you can be writing a poem, you can be writing something important, but we use the phrasal verb to write down to mean that we're going to write something that is important for us to remember or important to us to have on paper so that we can look at it later. We can reference it later. So if you say, can you write down your phone number? It means I need this so that I can look at it because I can't remember your phone number in my head. Or let me write down your address in my phone. You don't have to physically be writing it with a pen and paper. You could be typing it, but we use this phrasal verb even if we're just putting it on our phone. I need to write down your address. I need to write down, the time of my appointment. Whatever you need to remember, we use that phrasal verb, write down.
Write that down.
To drop versus to drop behind. So these two have very different meanings as well. If you drop something, you simply let it fall or fall to the floor. So like I dropped my pencil, I dropped my pen, or I hate when I drop my phone. If you say that you're going to drop behind, it means you are going to be behind in progress. A really common example is if a student is not really understanding the class and they're not really putting in work, they're going to drop behind. Another phrasal verb that means the exact same thing is to fall behind. So here it would be to fall versus to fall behind. It means you're going to lose progress or you're not going to be as far as the rest of everyone else. So this is used a lot of times in school. You could just be talking about life in general, like, I don't want to drop behind my friends. All my friends are getting married and having kids, and, I'm just working my job and I can't find someone to marry or whatever it might be. So it just means you're falling behind in progress if you fall behind or drop behind. Let's move on to some phrasal verbs containing off. So to drift versus to drift off. If you talk about something drifting, it's slowly moving and it doesn't really have any control. We're talking about drifting usually when it comes to something in the water. So if a boat is just drifting, it means it doesn't have an anchor down and it doesn't have the motor going. It's just floating along and nobody's controlling it. When we use drift off, we are talking about falling asleep here. So again, the off in this phrasal verb really changes the meaning here. So if we say, I was reading last night and I drifted off while I had my book open, it means you fell asleep while you were reading. Or I like to drift off to a podcast every night. This means I like to fall asleep while I'm listening to a podcast. So it means, slowly fall asleep when you say you're going to drift off. A lot of times, little kids, when they're very tired, they'll drift off doing the funniest things. Like they'll drift off while they're eating, or they'll drift off while they, have a sucker in their mouth or something just insane because they just get so tired and they don't like to go to sleep because they're just having so much fun.
Now, you wait for her to drift off.
So this next one is not only a phrasal verb, but it's also a really good slang term. So to go versus to go off. You probably learned the verb to go as one of the first verbs you learned in English. It means to leave or to move. When we talk about to go off, it can mean it can start to make a loud noise. For instance, my alarm clock is going off, or my car alarm is going off, or the fire alarm is going off. It means it's starting to make a really loud noise or alert. But this is also a slang term that's actually used quite frequently now. If we say that somebody is going off on another person, it means they are yelling at them. They are sharing a piece of their mind. There's an idiom for you. They're telling them why they're angry or why they are wrong. So in the past tense, we could say that they went off on them. Or again, our alarm went off. Go off, went off. To rip versus to rip off. If you rip something, you're simply going to tear it apart. Now, if you rip off someone, it means you scam them or you did something that was kind of unfair. So if you buy a gold watch from a store and you get home and the gold starts to scratch off and you learn it wasn't real gold, it was just paint, but you paid the price of a real gold watch, well, you just got scammed, and you could also say that you got ripped off. Maybe you go to McDonald's and they forget to give you half your food. You could say, they ripped me off. I didn't even get half my food. So, of course, it's a mistake. You can probably go back and they'll give it to you. But you could also say, I got ripped off. I did not get what I paid for.
Oh, nothing. Rip off!
Our last two phrasal verbs today contain to. So we have to answer versus to answer to. So answering a question would simply be, providing a response, saying, what is the answer to a question, answering, or answering the phone. Hello. When we say that someone is answering to another person, it means they are following somebody's authority, or they have to follow the directions because someone is higher up than them, or a boss, especially when we're talking about work. So I answer to my boss, who is this person. This means that they are in charge of me. So it's a lot different than just saying, I'm answering a question. I'm answering to a person. They are in charge of me. They are my boss. And if you don't have a boss, maybe you are self-employed like myself, you don't answer to anyone.
So nobody to answer to.
Okay, now this last one, it's not a simple verb versus a phrasal verb. It's a phrasal verb versus a more complex phrasal verb. So pay close attention, because if you've made it this far in the lesson, I know you are really, really learning. So first we have come down. Come down, come downstairs. This means, go down, especially in levels on a house. When we say something is going to come down to something, we're talking about the deciding factor in a situation. Remember, I told you this phrasal verb was a little bit complicated. Let me give you a couple of examples here. So I'm a runner. I like to run, but sometimes it comes down to the weather if I am being consistent or not. So the deciding factor here is the weather. It's coming down to the weather, because if it's really cold outside, I don't like to go for a run, or if it's raining or storming or whatever it would be. But if it's nice, the decision is going to come down to me going for a run because it's nice out. If you're trying to eat healthy and you're deciding what's, For lunch, it might come down to which option is more healthy. Are you going to eat pizza or are you going to eat a salad? Well, it comes down to the fact that salad has less calories here. So that's the deciding factor in what you eat. Congratulations, because now you've mastered 20 new phrasal verbs. Remember that sometimes phrasal verbs change the base verb only slightly, but sometimes they're adding emphasis or sometimes the meaning changes dramatically. Now that you've mastered these phrasal verbs, I'm going to put some new videos on screen for you to study another English lesson about phrasal verbs. And please visit EnglishWithKayla.com because you can try out my Upgrade to Native course there. I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Goodbye!